The giant crystal room of the Galaxy Council buzzed with angry voices as creatures from 47 different worlds gathered for the most important vote in space. History Ambassador Hyan-Woo from Earth sat in the back corner of the room, his old, weathered face showed nothing as the alien beings argued about what to do with humanity. The room itself was massive, bigger than any building on Earth. The walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Floating platforms held representatives from dozens of species, some breathing air, others floating in tanks of strange liquid. Hyan-Woo had been to this place many times over the past year. Each visit had been the same. The aliens would talk about humans like they were discussing pets or wild animals. Today felt different, though. Today they were going to make a decision that would change everything. The reptilian creature from the Vorthak homeworld stood on his platform. His scales shifted from dark green to bright red as he got angrier. This was how his species showed emotion, through color changes. He pointed one clawed finger toward the human section of the room. These humans are nothing but babies, he hissed through his translator device. They discovered fire yesterday, and now they want to sit with civilizations that have ruled the stars for thousands of years. It is madness, his words echoed through the crystal chamber. Other aliens nodded in agreement. The insect-like klaxon delegate clicked her sharp mouth parts together, making a sound like breaking glass. Her species communicated through complex clicking sounds that most other beings found annoying. In our 3,000 years of space travel, we have never seen such boldness. She clicked. The humans have been in space for less than 100 years. Yet they demand to be treated as equals with races that built starships when their world was covered in ice. But then Elder Zephyr spoke, and the entire room fell silent. The ancient being was older than most civilizations. His body was made of pure energy contained in a shimmering field that hurt to look at directly. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind blowing through empty caves. Perhaps that is exactly why we should be afraid of them, Elder Zephyr said slowly. In their short time in this galaxy, they have done things that took us thousands of years to accomplish. They learn fast, they adapt faster, and they never give up. The human ambassador listened to every insult, every dismissal. His dark eyes grew harder with each cruel word, but his face remained calm. Hyan-Woo had learned long ago that showing anger in this place was seen as weakness, so he sat quietly and let them talk. The debate went on for hours. Some species argued that humans were too dangerous, too wild, too unpredictable to be trusted with real power. Others said humans were too weak, too divided among themselves to be any real threat. The arguments went in circles. A few aliens spoke in favor of humanity. The peaceful Delaney, who looked like walking trees, talked about how humans had helped them improve their farming techniques. The small furry Krillin spoke about human doctors who had saved their children from a terrible disease, but these voices were few. The Galactic Chancellor finally called for order. The Chancellor was a being of pure energy like Elder Zephyr, but younger and more impatient. The energy field that contained the Chancellor pulsed with different colors as it spoke. We have a simple choice, the Chancellor announced. Either we give humans the status they want, or we risk war with a species that has already proven to be very resourceful in solving problems. The room erupted in angry voices at the mention of war. Many species remembered the stories of human conflicts, stories of a species that fought with such creativity and determination that they often won battles they should have lost. Stories of humans who never surrendered even when defeat seemed certain. The Vorthak delegate stood again, his scales now deep purple with rage. War, he shouted. Let them try. We have weapons. They cannot imagine ships that could destroy their entire world. But Elder Zephyr spoke again, his ancient voice cutting through the noise. You forget that they have already surprised us many times. Who among you predicted that a species so young could develop faster than light travel so quickly? Who expected them to solve the energy crisis that has plagued the galaxy for centuries? The room fell quiet again. It was true. Humans had done the impossible several times in their short time in space. They had invented new technologies that older civilizations had thought were impossible. They had made peace between species that had been fighting for generations. They had found solutions to problems that had stumped galactic scientists for decades. The vote was called. Each species would cast their decision. The results would be final and binding under galactic law. The voting took place in silence. Each delegate pressing buttons on their platform to record their choice. The counting seemed to take forever. Hin-Woo watched as numbers appeared on the great display. Screen in the center of the room, 24 species voted to grant humanity superior species status. They believed it would be easier to control humans through paperwork and bureaucracy than through war. 23 species voted against sensing. That giving humans this power would lead to trouble. As the results flashed on the screen, Ambassador Hyun-Woo stood slowly. His movements were careful and deliberate. He had practiced this moment many times. The entire room watched as he walked to the center platform. The Republic of Earth accepts this designation, he said in a calm, clear voice. His words were translated into dozens of languages and broadcast across the galaxy. We look forward to working with our fellow council members as equals. The chamber fell completely silent for a moment. No one moved. The aliens had expected anger or celebration from the human. Instead, they got something that made them all uncomfortable, a quiet confidence that suggested the humans had been planning for. This moment, Elder Zephan felt a chill run through his ancient energy field. He had lived long enough to recognize dangerous moments in history. This felt like one of those moments. The other species were already celebrating their clever political move. They thought they had outsmarted the humans by giving them what they wanted with strings attached, but Zephan remembered something the human ambassador had said during the early meetings months ago. It was an old human saying, "Be careful what you wish for because you might get it." At the time, it had seemed like a simple warning. Now it felt like a prophecy. As ambassador Hyun-Woo left the chamber, he passed by Elder Zephan. The ancient being tried to read the human but found only calm determination. The kind of calm that came before storms. The other aliens continued their discussions about how to manage their new, superior species partners. They talked about committees and oversight and bureaucratic controls. They were so busy planning how to limit human power that they missed the most important detail. They had just given humanity legal authority to act on behalf of galactic civilization. They had made humans equals in the eyes of galactic law. And most importantly, they had underestimated what humans would do with that power. The vote was over. The decision was made. The galaxy would never be the same again. 3 days after the vote, the Galaxy Council knew they had made a terrible mistake. The first sign of trouble came when Captain Min-ho of the Earth Defense Force arrived at the council station with a fleet of human ships that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The council members had been congratulating themselves on their clever politics when the communication channels suddenly filled with a calm professional voice that made everyone stop talking. According to Galactic Law Section 4.7, Captain Min-ho announced, "Superior species have the right to review and approve all military actions within their designated sectors." His voice was steady and polite, but something about it made even the bravest warriors feel nervous. The Vorthak had been planning their attack on the peaceful Delany worlds for 3 long months. Their mighty war fleet was already positioned at the edge of Delany space, ready to strike and claim the rich farming worlds for themselves. Now suddenly they found human ships blocking their path. The Vorthak fleet was impressive, 200 warships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. The ships bristled with weapons that could crack planets, and half their hulls were armored with metal harder than diamond. The commanders had fought in dozens of wars and never lost a battle. "This is madness," the Vorthak fleet commander roared over the radio. His translator struggled to convert his angry hisses into words other species could understand. "We have been planning this operation for months. You cannot simply interfere, Captain." Min-ho's response came back immediately, and his politeness somehow made it more frightening. "Actually, we can," he said. "As a superior species, Earth has the authority to mediate conflicts between lesser species. The Delany have requested our protection." The human fleet was tiny compared to the Vorthak armada, only 30 ships against 200. The Vorthak vessels were bigger, stronger, and more heavily armed. Any sane military commander would have retreated immediately. But humans had never been accused of being entirely sane. The Vorthak commander decided to teach these upstart humans a lesson. His fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. This would be over quickly, he thought. One demonstration of Vorthak power and the humans would learn their place. What happened next would be studied in military schools across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. The human ships did not fight like any civilized species had ever fought before. They did not line up in neat formations or follow the ancient rules of space combat. Instead, the human fleet scattered like leaves in a storm. The ships split into small groups using the nearby asteroid field as cover. They struck at the Vorthak supply ships, first cutting off fuel and ammunition to the main fleet. Then they targeted the communication arrays, leaving the Vorthak ships unable to coordinate their attacks. Captain Minho had studied every major space battle in galactic history. He knew that most alien species fought the same way they had for thousands of years. Straight lines, heavy firepower, overwhelming force, but humans had learned different lessons from their wars. The Vorthak found themselves fighting shadows. The human ships would appear from behind an asteroid, fire their weapons, and disappear before the Vorthak could respond. When the reptilian warriors tried to pursue, they found themselves separated from their fleet mates, picked off one by one. But the real shock came when the humans began boarding the damaged Vorthak ships. Instead of the brutal assault everyone expected, they offered medical help to the wounded Vorthak warriors. Human medics worked alongside their soldiers, treating injuries and saving lives. The Vorthak fleet commander lay bleeding on the bridge of his flagship, his scales faded to gray with pain and confusion. A young human medic named Jiwon carefully cleaned his wounds and administered pain medication. "Why are you helping me?" the commander asked through his translator. "I came here to destroy your allies. I would have killed you all without hesitation." Jiwon looked up from her work. Her face was young and serious, but her eyes held depths that the alien warrior had never seen before. "Because that is what civilized beings do," she said simply. "We help those who need help, even our enemies." The Vorthak commander stared at her in amazement. In all his years of war, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans could be ruthless in battle, but showed mercy in victory. They fought like demons, but healed like angels. Within 6 hours, the mighty Vorthak fleet was defeated. Not destroyed, but scattered, confused, and completely demoralized. The survivors found themselves rescued by the same humans who had beaten them. Their wounded were treated, their ships were repaired, and they were sent home with a message. The message was delivered by Captain Minho himself. Speaking directly to the Vorthak High Command, "The Delany worlds are now under Earth protection," he said. "Any future aggression will be met with the same response. We prefer peace, but we are prepared for war." The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Vorthak, one of the most feared military powers in known space, had been defeated by a handful of human ships. Species that had lived in terror of Vorthak raids for generations suddenly felt hope, but the victory was only the beginning. The humans had proven they could fight, but more importantly, they had shown something that terrified the Galaxy Council even more. They had shown they could be both merciless and merciful at the same time. On the Council station, emergency meetings were called day and night. The alien leaders who had voted to give humans superior species status were beginning to realize what they had done. They had not just given humanity a title, they had given them legal authority to interfere in galactic affairs. The Klaxon delegate clicked her mandibles nervously as she spoke to the emergency session. "They used our own laws against us," she said. "The superior species designation gives them the right to review military actions. We cannot stop them without breaking our own legal system." Elder Zephan listened to the panicked discussions with growing dread. He had warned them that humans were dangerous, but even he had not expected them to act so quickly or so effectively. The vote had been 3 days ago, and already the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting. The humans had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had used bureaucracy as a weapon. They had turned the very system designed to control them into a tool for their own purposes, and they had done it all while following the law perfectly. Ambassador Hyun-woo sat in his quarters aboard the human diplomatic ship reading reports from across the galaxy. Every species was talking about the Vorthak defeat. Every government was trying to figure out what the humans would do next. His aide, a young woman named So Young, knocked on his door and entered with the latest intelligence reports. "So," she said, "the Regelian Empire is moving their fleet away from the Altarian colonies. The Klaxon Mining Consortium has suspended their raid on the independent world." Shin-woo nodded. This was exactly what he had hoped for. The other species were backing down from their planned aggressions, not because they feared human military power, But because they feared human interference, the humans had become the galaxy police whether anyone wanted it or not. The communication system chimed with an incoming message from Earth. It was from the president herself congratulating the diplomatic team on their success, but Hyowo knew this was just the beginning. The Galaxy Council had declared humans superior and were already regretting it. But they had no idea how much they would regret it. The humans had not just gained a title, they had gained the power to reshape galactic civilization, and they intended to use that power. The old order was crumbling, and the aliens were starting to realize that their biggest mistake was not giving humans too much power. It was underestimating what humans would do with that power once they had it. The Galaxy Council's second major shock came when they discovered what humans meant by working together. Ambassador Han Wu did not just attend council meetings. He completely changed how they worked. The Great Crystal Chamber that had been the center of galactic politics for thousands of years was about to experience something it had never seen before. Efficiency. I have been looking at the case files. Han Wu announced during his first official meeting as a superior species representative. There are over 4,000 unresolved disputes, some of them going back hundreds of years. This is completely unacceptable. The other ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their floating platforms. The slow, careful pace of galactic politics was not a problem. To them, it was a feature. The endless debates and delayed decisions helped maintain the balance of power that kept the established species in control. These matters require very careful thought. The Klaxon delegate clicked nervously. We cannot simply rush through complex diplomatic situations. Some of these disputes involve ancient treaties and territorial claims that go back millennia. Ambassador Hyan Wu smiled, and that smile made several aliens remember Elder Zephan warnings about underestimating humans. You are absolutely right, he said. These issues are complex. That is exactly why I brought help. The massive doors of the council chamber opened and a team of human specialists walked in. The aliens had never seen anything like this before in galactic politics. Each species sent one representative who was supposed to handle everything. Now, the humans were bringing experts. There was Lawyer Sujin, whose sharp mind had already found 17 major mistakes in galactic law. Economist Jae-sung had spent weeks studying trade disputes and finding solutions that would benefit everyone. Psychologist Dayun had amassed every species' communication patterns and cultural habits. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans set up portable computers and holographic displays. The council chamber suddenly looked more like a human office than the ancient ceremonial space it had been let. U.S. start with the Centauri mining rights dispute, Hyan Wu said, pointing to a three-dimensional map of the contested star system. This has been unresolved for 67 years because both the Rigelians and the Altarians claim they discovered it first. The dispute was legendary in galactic politics. Both species had armies of lawyers and historians who spent decades arguing about who had the better claim. Ancient documents were studied. Witnesses were called. Archaeological evidence was presented, but no solution had ever been found. Lawyer Sujin stepped forward with a confidence that made the alien diplomats nervous. According to all the evidence, both species discovered the system independently, she said. However, the Rigelians built the first permanent settlement, while the Altarians made the first detailed star chart. She displayed her analysis on the holographic projector, showing timelines and evidence that no one had ever organized this clearly before. Instead of fighting over who was first, why not share the profits based on what each species contributed? The solution was so simple and obvious that everyone wondered why no one had thought of it before. The Rigelians would get credit for establishing the colony. The Altarians would get credit for the scientific survey. Both would share the mining profits fairly within 2 hours. The dispute that had consumed galactic legal resources for decades was resolved. Both species signed an agreement and actually thanked the humans for helping them find a fair solution. But Sujin was just getting started. She moved to the next case. And the next. Each dispute that had seemed impossible to solve suddenly became manageable when approached with human logic and creativity. The real revolution came when economist Jae-sung presented his analysis of galactic trade patterns. The aliens had always assumed their economic system was working fine. They had never bothered to study whether it could work better. You are all losing enormous amounts of money, he said bluntly, displaying charts and graphs that made the alien economists gasp. In shock, the current system of separate trade agreements between individual species creates waste that costs everyone billions of credits. Every year his analysis showed how the galaxy economy really worked. The core species like the Vorthak and Klaxon controlled most of the trade routes. They charged high fees for smaller species to use their shipping networks. They created artificial shortages to drive up prices. The Klaxon worlds are rich in rare minerals, he continued, but they trade only with 3 other species. The Delany grow the best food in the galaxy, but most species never get to buy it because of trade restrictions. Everyone could benefit from a unified trade network. The alien representatives listened with growing excitement. As Jisung showed how much money they could all make, the Klaxon could sell their minerals to dozens of new markets. The Delany could feed the entire galaxy. The Vorthak industrial capacity could supply manufactured goods to species that desperately needed them. But the economist was not finished. The problem, he said, is that no one trusts anyone else enough to create such a system. That is where humanity comes in. As a superior species, we can act as neutral mediators and guarantors. The aliens found themselves nodding along, excited by the possibilities. They could see the profits, they could make the new markets, they could access the economic growth that would benefit everyone. Only later would they realize that the humans had just positioned themselves as the essential center of all galactic trade. Every transaction would go through human banks, every dispute would be resolved by human courts. Every trade route would be protected by human ships. Psychologist Dayun was working on an even deeper level. She had studied how each species communicated and was teaching them to understand each other better. The Vorthak showed emotions through color changes. The Klaxon used complex clicking sounds. The Delany communicated through chemical sense. For the first time in galactic history, species were beginning to truly understand each other. The Vorthak realized that their aggressive posturing was seen as threatening by species who communicated differently. The Klaxon learned that their clicking sounds were actually painful to some alien ears. Dayun set up translation programs that did not just convert words but explained cultural context. A Vorthak saying, "I will crush you," might actually mean, "I respect your strength," in their culture. But other species heard it as a threat. Now, the translators would explain both the words and the cultural meaning. The changes were happening so fast that the Galaxy Council could barely keep up. Within weeks, the ancient system of galactic politics was being transformed. The endless debates were being replaced by efficient problem-solving. The cultural misunderstandings that had caused wars were being resolved through better communication. Ambassador Hyan Wu watched it all with satisfaction. The humans had not conquered the galaxy through force. They had done something far more effective. They had made themselves indispensable. Every species now needed human help to navigate the new systems. The humans had created every trade deal required human mediation. Every dispute needed human resolution. Every cultural exchange needed human translation. The Galaxy Council had given humans superior species status, thinking they could control them through bureaucracy. Instead, the humans had used that bureaucracy to make themselves the center of galactic civilization, and the most frightening part was that the aliens were grateful for it. The galaxy was working better than it ever had before. Problems were being solved. Prosperity was increasing. Understanding between species was growing. The humans had proven that sometimes the best way to take control was to help everyone get what they wanted. The Galaxy Council was beginning to understand that they had not just made a political mistake. They had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization, and there was no going back. 3 months after gaining superior species status, humanity had changed galactic civilization in ways the Council never imagined. The changes started small, but spread like fire through dry grass, transforming everything they touched. It began with something as simple as food engineer Teho was working on the neutral trading station Nexus Prime when he got tired of eating the same bland, nutritionally balanced meals that were standard throughout the galaxy. The food was healthy, but it had no taste, no soul, no connection to the beings who ate it. Teho started cooking dishes from his homeland Korea, using ingredients he traded from various alien worlds. He adapted ancient recipes to work with vegetables from the Delany farms and spices From the Vorthak homeworld, the results were amazing combinations of flavors that no one had ever experienced before. The smell of his cooking spread through the station quarters. Aliens who had never smelled anything like Korean stew made with alien ingredients began gathering outside his quarters. Their curiosity overcame their usual species prejudices. "What is this sensation?" asked a Rigelian diplomat, his normally blank face showing something that might have been pleasure. "The tastes. They work together in ways I have never experienced before." Taho grinned as he served another bowl. "It is called seasoning," he explained. "You take ingredients that taste good alone and combine them to create something even better. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts." The concept spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have predicted. Within weeks, alien chefs on dozens of worlds were experimenting with combining flavors from different species. The rigid species-specific cuisine that had dominated galactic culture for thousands of years began to blur, and Vorthak restaurants started serving Delany vegetables with traditional reptilian spices. Klaxon cooking incorporated human techniques for combining sweet and sour flavors. The peaceful plant-like species began creating dishes that even carnivorous aliens could enjoy. But food was just the beginning. Human musician. The Jinn introduced the concept of collaborative art to a galaxy where each species had developed their creative expressions in complete isolation. Her first interspecies concert was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The performance took place in the Great Amphitheater on the Galactic Art Center, a massive space that could hold representatives from every known species. The Jinn had spent months working with alien musicians, learning their instruments and teaching them human techniques. "Music is a universal language," she announced to the packed audience. "It does not matter if you have 2 legs, 6 legs, or float in an energy field. Rhythm and melody speak to every conscious being in ways that words cannot." The concert began with klaxon percussion, complex rhythms that most species found impossible to follow. But then Vorthak harmonic crystals joined in, their haunting melodies weaving through the beats. Finally, the Jinn voice soared above it all, singing in a mixture of human languages and alien musical phrases. The audience was mesmerized for the first time. Beings from different species were experiencing art that spoke to all of them simultaneously. The Vorthak felt emotions they had no names for. The klaxon heard melodies that made their entire bodies vibrate in harmony. The Delany swayed to rhythms that matched their own life cycles. The concert was broadcast across the galaxy, inspiring thousands of interspecies artistic collaborations. Suddenly, alien musicians were traveling to other worlds to learn new techniques. Artists were creating works that combined the best elements of multiple cultures. Meanwhile, human teacher Bo-Ra was revolutionizing education on the peaceful Delany worlds. The Delany had always been excellent farmers and botanists, but they had never developed advanced technology. Because their culture valued harmony with nature over technological progress. "Why should you have to choose?" Bo-Ra asked her class of young Delany students. "On Earth, we have learned to combine technology with environmental protection. Let me show you how to build computers using living materials." Her students were fascinated. They had never imagined that technology could work with nature instead of against it. Bo-Ra taught them to grow biocomputers that used plant-based processors, living networks that used root systems for communication, transportation systems that worked with planetary energy flows. Within months, the Delany were developing technologies that amazed the galaxy. Their living computers were more efficient than traditional machines. Their bio-networks could process information faster than any artificial system. Their transportation moved without creating pollution. The transformation was not limited to technology. Human philosopher Sungmin was working with the logical Rigelian species to develop new approaches to ethics and morality. The Rigelians had always been guided by pure logic, but they struggled with questions that had no clear logical answers. "Logic is important," Sungmin explained to a gathering of Rigelian thinkers, "but logic alone cannot tell us what is right or wrong. We need wisdom, compassion, and understanding to guide our decisions." He introduced them to human concepts of empathy and moral reasoning. The Rigelians were fascinated by the idea that ethical decisions could be both logical and emotional. They began developing new philosophical frameworks that combined their logical nature with human emotional intelligence. The Cultural Revolution was happening on every level. Human architect Su was working with the crystalline Zephyrian species to create buildings that were both beautiful and functional. The Zephyrians had always built for eternity, creating structures that lasted for thousands of years, but provided no comfort for their inhabitants. Buildings should serve the beings who use them, Insu explained as he showed them designs that combined Zephyrian durability with human concepts of comfort and beauty. The resulting architecture was breathtaking crystal structures that glowed with inner light but included spaces designed for rest and contemplation. Buildings that would last forever but felt like homes rather than monuments. Human scientist Kenya was working with the aquatic Delphinian species to develop new approaches to environmental science. The Delphinins had always lived in harmony with their ocean worlds, but they had never considered that their knowledge could help other species. Your understanding of ecosystem balance is exactly what the galaxy needs, Kenya told them as she showed them how their techniques could be adapted to different environments. Soon, Delphinian environmental scientists were working on dozens of worlds, helping other species repair damaged ecosystems. Their methods were being adapted for desert planets, forest worlds, and even the artificial environments of space stations. The Galaxy Council watched these developments with growing panic. They had expected humans to fit into existing galactic civilization. Instead, humans were transforming it into something entirely new, something that no one could control. The changes were happening too fast to stop. Species that had been isolated for millennia were suddenly working together, sharing knowledge and creating new forms of art, science, and culture. The careful boundaries that had kept the galaxy stable were dissolving. Elder Zephyr observed the transformation with a mixture of wonder and terror. He had lived through many changes in galactic history, but nothing like this. The humans had not just joined galactic civilization, they had fundamentally altered what it meant to be part of it. Most frightening aspect was that the changes were voluntary. No one was being forced to adopt human ideas or methods, but the human approach was so clearly superior that species were choosing to embrace it. Food tasted better when prepared with human techniques. Music was more beautiful when it combined multiple species. Traditions, technology worked better when it incorporated human innovation. Art was more meaningful when it expressed universal rather than species-specific themes. The Galaxy Council realized they had unleashed something they could never contain. The humans had not conquered the galaxy through force. They had done something far more dangerous. They had shown other species what was possible when beings worked together. And once that knowledge spread, there was no way to make it disappear. The Cultural Revolution was unstoppable because it was irresistible. Who would choose isolation when cooperation offered so much more? Who would choose limitation when collaboration offered unlimited possibilities? The galaxy was changing, and the humans were leading that change, not through domination, but through demonstration. They were proving that the old ways were not the only ways, and that realization was transforming everything. 6 months after the fateful vote, the Galaxy Council faced their worst nightmare. Other species were starting to act like humans. The transformation had spread beyond anyone's ability to control it and was accelerating with each passing day. The first sign of real trouble came from the Altarian colonies. Commander Wu Jin of the Human Diplomatic Corps had been working on a routine trade agreement when she discovered something disturbing in the colonial records. According to these documents, she said to the Altarian Trade Minister, "Your people have been working under conditions that violate basic rights for thinking beings. 18-hour workdays, minimal rest periods, no medical care for work injuries." The trade minister feathers ruffled with discomfort, showing his species' version of embarrassment. "These are standard conditions for colonial development," he replied. "The Altarian Council has approved all these practices. They are necessary for economic progress." Commander Wu Jin expression hardened in a way that made the alien official nervous. As a superior species, humanity has certain duties to protect the welfare of all galactic citizens. We cannot allow these conditions to continue. What happened next sent shock waves through the galaxy. Instead of filing a formal complaint through the slow, bureaucratic channels, Wu Jin went directly to the Altarian colonies. She brought with her human labor organizers, medical staff, and legal experts. The human team arrived on the mining world of Altair 7, where thousands of Altarian workers labored in dangerous conditions, extracting rare metals for their homeworld. The workers had never seen anything like the humans before, beings who came not to exploit them, but to help them within. Days the Altarian workers had formed their first labor union. They demanded better working conditions, fair wages, and the right to speak for themselves. When the colonial administrators tried to stop the movement, they found themselves facing both human legal advocates and, more importantly, the unified resistance of their own people. "We deserve better than this," declared Claytak, a young Altarian, who had become the unofficial leader of the movement. "The humans have shown us that workers have rights, that we do not have to accept suffering as the price of progress." Labor movements spread like wildfire to other Altarian worlds, then to other species. Soon Vorthak industrial workers were demanding safer conditions in their metal foundries. Klaxon miners were organizing for better air systems in their tunnels. Even the peaceful Delany were forming cooperatives to ensure fair distribution of their crops. The Galaxy Council held emergency sessions as their carefully maintained order began to crumble. "This is exactly what we feared," hissed the Vorthak representative, his scales permanently red with anger. "The humans are spreading their chaos throughout the galaxy," but the chaos was actually a different kind of order. Human economist Jaesung had been studying the galactic economy and had discovered something that horrified the ruling classes. The current system was designed to keep most species poor while making a few species very rich. "The numbers do not lie," he reported to Ambassador Hernwu. "The galactic economy operates on artificial scarcity. There are enough resources to provide a good life for every being in the galaxy, but the distribution system is designed to maintain power structures." The revelation spark what humans called the galactic awakening species that had accepted their place in the cosmic order for thousands of years began to question why they had to remain inferior to others. The careful balance of power that had kept the galaxy stable was dissolving. On the remote mining world of Kepler 442b, human administrator Insu made a decision that would change everything. Instead of extracting maximum resources for the benefit of the core worlds, he implemented a profit-sharing system that gave the local population ownership of their planet wealth. "This is your world," he told the mixed population of miners from various species. "Why should distant bureaucrats decide how your work is rewarded? You should benefit from your own labor." The miners, who had never considered that they might have any say in their own fate, embraced the idea with enthusiasm. Production actually increased as workers became invested in their success rather than simply trying to survive another day. The success of the profit-sharing experiment could not be hidden. Other worlds began demanding similar arrangements. The old system of colonial exploitation was crumbling as workers everywhere realized they had alternatives. The transformation went beyond economics. Human social worker De Yoon was working with refugee populations on the border worlds. She discovered that many species had been displaced by wars or economic disasters and were living in terrible conditions. "These beings are not charity cases," she announced to the Galactic Relief Agency. "They are people with skills, knowledge, and potential. They do not need handouts, they need opportunities." She revolutionized the refugee system by treating displaced beings as assets rather than problems. Vorthak refugees became teachers sharing their metallurgy knowledge. Klaxon refugees became engineers using their tunneling expertise. Delany refugees became agricultural consultants. The results were amazing. Refugee camps became training centers. Displaced populations became skilled workers, contributing to their new communities. The galaxy discovered that diversity was not a problem to be managed, but a resource to be celebrated. Meanwhile, human scientist Young Ho was working with the academic institutions of the galaxy. He discovered that most species had developed their sciences in isolation, never sharing knowledge or building on each other's discoveries. "Think of how much we could accomplish if we worked together," he said to a gathering of the galaxy's greatest minds. "Each species has developed unique approaches to understanding the universe. What could we learn by combining our knowledge?" The first interspecies science consortium was established within months, bringing together researchers from dozens of worlds. The breakthroughs came immediately. Vorthak metallurgy combined with Klaxon engineering created new materials stronger than anything previously known. Delany biological knowledge merged with human medical science to develop cures for diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. The Galaxy Council realized they had completely lost control of the situation. The humans had not just changed galactic civilization, they had inspired other species to continue changing it. The revolution was no longer dependent on humanity, it had become self-sustaining species that had been enemies for generations were now working together, solving problems that had seemed impossible. Former colonies were demanding independence and getting it. Workers who had been exploited for centuries were organizing and winning better conditions. The most terrifying part was that the changes were making the galaxy genuinely better. Living standards were rising on dozens of worlds. Scientific progress was accelerating. Cultural exchange was creating new forms of art and expression that enriched every species. Elder Zephan watched the transformation with growing amazement. The humans had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not conquered through force or economics. They had conquered through inspiration. They had shown other species what was possible when beings worked together as equals. And once that knowledge spread, there was no way to contain it. The revolution was not being imposed from above, it was growing from below as ordinary beings realized they deserved better lives. The Galaxy Council meetings became increasingly frantic as the old order collapsed around them, but their panic was pointless. The transformation was beyond their control now. It belonged to every species in the galaxy. The humans had lit a fire that could not be extinguished. They had given the galaxy something more dangerous than any weapon, hope, and hope once awakened could not be put back to sleep. The revolution was spreading and there was no stopping it. The galaxy would never be the same again. 1 year after the Galaxy Council fateful vote, the galaxy was completely unrecognizable. The revolution that had started with humanity designation as a superior species had grown into something the Council had never imagined: a true democratic galactic civilization. The final transformation began on the neutral world of Concordia, where Ambassador Haiyan Wu called for a new constitutional convention. Representatives from every species in the galaxy were invited, not just the traditional council members, but also the workers, the colonists, the farmers, and the artists, who had been excluded from galactic politics for thousands of years. The current system is completely broken, Haiyan Wu announced to the assembled delegates from hundreds of worlds. It was designed to keep power in the hands of a few species while keeping everyone else powerless. But we have seen what is possible when beings work together as equals. The convention took place in a massive amphitheater that had been built specifically for this purpose. The structure itself was a symbol of the new galaxy, designed by architects from dozens of species working together. Crystal walls from the Zephyrians provided strength, living wood from the Delany created warmth. Vorthek metalwork added beauty, Klaxon engineering made it all possible. Elder Zephan attended the convention as an observer, not a participant. He had lived through many changes in galactic history, but nothing like this. As he watched the delegates work together, he felt both admiration and regret. "You have done exactly what I feared you would do," he said to Ambassador Haiyan Wu during a private meeting. "You have made the galaxy a better place, and in doing so you have made our old system completely obsolete." The human ambassador nodded thoughtfully. "That was never our goal," he replied. "We simply wanted to be treated as equals. But once we started working together, we realized that equality should not be a privilege, it should be a basic right for all thinking beings." The new galactic constitution that emerged from the convention was unlike anything in the history of the universe. It established fundamental rights for all sentient beings, regardless of species. It created a truly representative government where every world had a voice based on its population. Most importantly, it established that no species could ever be considered naturally superior to another. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humanity had used their designation as a superior species to eliminate the very concept of superior species. They had proven their superiority by rejecting superiority itself. The economic transformation was equally dramatic. The new galactic economy, based on cooperation rather than exploitation, increased overall productivity by 300% while eliminating poverty on most worlds. The Vorthak foundries, now owned by the workers who operated them, produced better quality goods while providing safe working conditions. The Klaxon Mines managed by the miners themselves extracted resources in ways that did not damage their underground cities. The Delany agricultural cooperatives fed the entire galaxy, while maintaining the natural balance of their worlds, but perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The galaxy that had been divided by species barriers for thousands of years began to see itself as one diverse but unified civilization. Interspecies marriages became common. Children grew up learning multiple languages and understanding different cultures. Art, music, and literature flourished as beings shared their unique perspectives. The rigid cultural boundaries that had kept species isolated for millennia dissolved into a rich tapestry of shared creativity. Dr. Yunji, now the galaxy's first interspecies cultural exchange director, observed the transformation with wonder. "We never set out to change the galaxy," she reflected. "We just wanted to be ourselves. But apparently being human means refusing to accept that things have to stay the way they have always been." The former Galaxy Council members, stripped of their special privileges but welcomed as equals in the new order, had to admit that the humans had accomplished something remarkable. They had turned a galaxy of separate, often hostile species into a unified civilization that was stronger than any of its parts. The transformation was not without challenges. Some species resisted the changes, preferring the old system where they had held power over others. A few worlds tried to maintain the old ways of doing things, but they found themselves increasingly isolated as the rest of the galaxy moved forward. The most stubborn resistance came from some of the core worlds that had benefited most from the old system. They formed what they called the Traditional Alliance, claiming that the new order was destroying galactic civilization, but their resistance crumbled when their own people began demanding the same rights and opportunities available elsewhere. Young Vorthek left their homeworld to work in the new cooperative industries. Klaxon students traveled to integrated universities. Delany artists moved to cosmopolitan worlds where their work was appreciated by all species. The Traditional Alliance found themselves ruling over empty worlds as their populations migrated to places where they could live freely. The old system had not been destroyed by force, it had been abandoned by choice. The greatest transformation was in how beings thought about themselves and others. The old prejudices based on species differences began to seem ridiculous when everyone was working together, solving problems and creating beauty. A young Vorthek engineer named Korthok expressed it perfectly during a television interview. "I used to think that being Vorthek made me superior to other species," he said, "but working with humans, Klaxon Delany and others, has shown me that we are all just individuals with different strengths. Every species has something valuable to contribute." The new galactic government faced its first major test when a crisis erupted on the rim worlds. A plague was spreading that affected multiple species and threatened to devastate entire sectors. The old Galaxy Council would have formed committees, held debates, and eventually done too little too late. Instead, the new government acted immediately. Human medical teams worked with Delany biologists and Vorthek chemists to develop treatments. Klaxon engineers built distribution networks to deliver medicine to affected worlds. The crisis was contained within weeks instead of the years it would have taken under the old system. As Ambassador Hyanwu stood before the new Galactic Assembly, representing not just humanity, but the vision of equality that had transformed the galaxy, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The Galaxy Council declared humans superior and regretted it immediately. He said to the assembled delegates, "But they were right to regret it, not because we proved unworthy of the designation, but because we proved that no one is worthy of. I've looked out